one I'm going to give you is Designing Women. It's kind of in the shadow of Golden Girls, but for its time, it was a similar setup. But it's a really funny show. I mean, Dixie Carter alone is fantastic. So good time to rediscover that. For the 90s binge, I'm going to recommend two series. The first is Seinfeld. We all know Seinfeld, the show about nothing. And I'll also recommend Living Single, a show that I think is better than Friends. Fight me on that, everybody. So the next I'm going to give is some current shows, or somewhat more current. I think 30 Rock is fantastic. This is just personal bias talking. I love that series. I am the resident 30 Rock fan. And Fresh Off the Boat, which is a really funny show that's going to be, I believe, currently in its final season. Also, the network FX has exclusive streaming rights to these shows, and there's going to be a bunch of fun, good stuff on there. Atlanta's on there. I'd really recommend. What We Do in the Shadows is funny. If you're familiar with the Taika Waititi film, this is the series based off of that. And they're also going to have some new series coming up. I'm really excited for Miss America, which is about second wave feminism in the 60s and 70s. Gloria Steinem, Shirley Chisholm, Bella Asbug, and your opponent, Phyllis Schlafly, which the more people find out about her, the better, in my opinion, because she's, I guess, not for the right reasons, but people should know how much damage she did. I'm also going to say for Hulu original programming, not The Handmaid's Tale. I don't like that series, but I loved The Act last year. That was the one with Patricia Arquette and her wheelchair-bound daughter, Gypsy Rose. If you are a true crime fan, you are going to love The Act. I remembered watching that every time there's a new episode. Just my friend and I would text back like, OMG, look what just happened. Also, Shrill, which is based on the Lindy West book. Really cute and fun show. Pretty lighthearted. Covers some serious topics, but overall, pretty light tone. And the final one I'll recommend is Pen 15. This is a fairly esoteric recommendation. I was a teenager right around the time the show takes place, and it covers teen years. So if you are exactly in my age group and want an uncomfortable reminder of fashion of that era, Pen 15 is great. Also, some great stuff for kids. Teen Titans Go, again, an 11-minute episode. I think it's hilarious. And Steven Universe, the first four seasons are on Hulu. I think some of the latter ones have moved to HBO, unfortunately. But Steven Universe is a show that just continuously impresses me with how funny it is and how creative it is, and also how mature it is. It's a kids show that doesn't talk down to kids. So my final TV recommendation, Food Network. See, I do watch some normal things. And there is nothing like just after a hard day sitting down and watching a couple episodes of some kind of a baking championship or Chopped. Any episode where Def Goldman is judging, I'm in, and I love it. Moving on to movie recommendations. Probably the favorite thing I have on there is National Lampoon's Vacation. This movie's a classic. They actually have all the National Lampoon movies up there, but I think, as most people know, the only two National Lampoon movies worth watching are the original Vacation and Christmas Vacation. European Vacation in Vegas, I mean, it's okay to like a movie, but I can't recommend them. The other one I'll recommend came out last year, Booksmart. One of my favorites of last year. It's a raunchy comedy about two straight-A students who decide to go to their first party. Again, I'm going to emphasize it's rated R, it's raunchy. I think everyone knows what they can and can't handle, but it is a comedy that also has a lot of heart, a lot of intelligence. I think it was one of my top 4 or 5 films last year. A couple of more forgotten movies are on Hulu, which I do like. The first is 50-50, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Seth Rogen. That's sort of a comedy drama, a dramedy about going through cancer. I remember really liking it, so hopefully this will get discovered. Notes on a Scandal, which I saw in college with a friend, and we absolutely loved it. It's Cate Blanchett and Judi Dench. It's a very overwrought to the point of camp drama. If you like over-the-top drama, oh my goodness, and Britishness, Notes on a Scandal's for you. I love that movie. Waiting to Exhale, going back to the 90s with Whitney Houston. I mean, that movie's worth it just for the scene where Angela Bassett takes her cheating husband's stuff, puts him in a car, and lights it on fire. Yes, Hilo. Yes, she does. And finally, I'll do Assassination Nation, which came out 2 years ago. Kind of, I would say, a modern day exploitation flick, only not as gross as some of the older ones. It's an acquired taste, but it was so different. I really liked what it was doing. It's got a girl power feel. It's definitely trying to be very timely, what with smartphones and hacking information. But it's a movie that set out there to make a statement and do its own thing, and I overall liked what it did. Two more recommendations for films. The first is a documentary called Love Gilda. If anyone's familiar with old school Saturday Night Live, Gilda Radner was the breakout female performer of that show. And she unfortunately passed away in the late 80s of cancer. So, I mean, you're going to watch this and not only see how funny she is, but you're also going to think what a lot of people think when very talented people die young, which is how much more could they have done and given had they not been taken so quickly. So it's a good documentary. You might want to have some tissues handy, but if you're also not familiar with her, it's a great introduction. And the other one I'll recommend is the Japanese film Shoplifters. This came out in 2018 and probably would have won Best Foreign Feature had Roma not been nominated. It's a great human, very human movie. It's about sort of a very makeshift family. They go around, they kind of live off the grid. The final 30 minutes is quite a gut punch, but it was one of the best movies I'd seen that year. And if you're new to Japanese cinema, especially modern Japanese cinema, this is a good place to start. So, of course, I can't do this without giving some horror recommendations. The first I'll recommend is 28 Days Later, the great Danny Boyle movie from 2002. Incorrectly gets categorized as a zombie movie. It is not. It is a plague movie. I think it's great. It really helped revitalize horror for the early aughts. And actually, even though it's not a zombie movie, it helped revitalize the zombie genre. I think it's great. It's got some kind of gory, bloody moments, so if you don't like that, keep that in mind. Cabin in the Woods is on there. That is a kind of self-referential comedy that deals in horror. I don't want to talk about it too much because there are some great twists and turns in this, but if you want horror with a little something extra, this is a great one to watch. The other two are, and I fully welcome this new trend, horror musicals. The first is Anna and the Apocalypse. This is a British movie about a girl who deals with the zombie apocalypse right before Christmas break at her school. It's very straightforward. The songs are genuinely pretty catchy. I'm still singing Hollywood Ending in my head. The other one is Little Monsters, starring one of my favorite actresses, Lupita Nyong'o. Now, I am going to give you this warning. The first 15 minutes of this movie, kind of grating because the main character himself is grating, and he's meant to be grating. But get past that, this movie has a lot of heart. It's very sweet. It's got some great gore moments. And between this and Us, I want to see Lupita do more horror movies. So, in probably one of the strangest segues we're going to have in this live stream, I'm going to go from horror to kids' movies. Because I actually think Hulu has some good stuff for kids. The first is Missing Link, last year's stop-motion animated movie about a Sasquatch, which I thought should have won Best Animated Picture. This is from the Laika Studios. It's really fun. It's really inventive. And I just say, hey, credit for not being a horror. Wow. Credit for not being a sequel or a remake. I still have horror on the brain, everybody. This is what comes with being cooped up inside. And the other three are from a really interesting era of animation. So this was the late 90s, early 2000 era of DreamWorks animation. So the first is Chicken Run. If you're familiar with Wallace and Gromit, this is the same studio, Aardman. And they're still working. They're still putting stuff out. Chicken Run is super fun and super charming. I think that was its, Wallace and Gromit got limited distribution. Chicken Run was their first wide US distribution film. But it's super fun. I really liked it. I actually just watched it. It holds up. The other two are The Road to El Dorado and Prince of Egypt. In these movies, even if you haven't seen the movies, you've probably heard the soundtracks. Fairly famous soundtracks. Road to El Dorado is Elton John, and Prince of Egypt has two very famous songs, the more famous one being the Mariah Carey Whitney Houston duet, When You Believe. And then there's the River Lullaby. And these movies are really good, and they make me kind of sad that they didn't become bigger hits because DreamWorks was trying to be an alternative to Disney, and the one that ended up working was Shrek. So DreamWorks really just went in that direction. And I think had, let's say, Road to El Dorado hit or Prince of Egypt hit, I think we would have at least had hand-drawn animation a little bit longer. And maybe they would have gone in a different sort of a tone as well. Personally, I think Prince of Egypt is a masterpiece. It's based on the story of Exodus, and it doesn't talk down to kids. It tries to stay fairly close to the story while being as kid-friendly as humanly possible. And rather than going for fairly like Disney-fied sing-along songs, the music is far more operatic, it's choral. And if anything, I kind of wonder, I'm like, why don't more people remember this movie? Because it is generally very good. And the animation, I think, is worth the price of admission alone. So yeah, actually, I would just say of all of my recommendations, Prince of Egypt would be my pick of the day. Watch that, rediscover it. People my age have kind of carried the torch for that movie a bit, but I don't think a lot of younger people have seen it, and certainly older people haven't seen it because they weren't the target audience at that point. But if you want to see a hidden gem of animation, Prince of Egypt is on Hulu, and I'd highly recommend watching it. And I'll see you tomorrow. Apologize for some of the technical difficulties, but tomorrow it's going to be fun because we're going to talk about stuff you can watch for free and where. See you tomorrow.